Hello again. I'll warrant that few viewers of this channel were aware that today is officially World Empathy Day, of all improbable things. Don't know, it seems to come round more quickly than Christmas, doesn't it? In the description to this video, I give a couple of links about this interesting celebration. I am, to be candid, not overly burdened with empathy myself. Thought I might say a little bit about the subject because, in my way of thinking, the whole business is something of a swindle. Even though today it's seen as being almost a defining feature of humanity, and the absence of empathy is seen as a red flag signaling a damaged personality. It all ties in with the modern view of the world in which those with a great deal of empathy are venerated while those who have a deficit are seen as being damaged goods and very likely to be a danger to the rest of us. In fact, the boot is altogether on the other foot. It is those claiming to possess a lot of empathy who are the most devious, cunning, and likely to deceive, while the people who openly admit that they have little or none of this quality are the honest and straightforward ones. It is not hard to see why this should be. Before looking at the concept of empathy, and considering how implausible the whole idea actually is, it might help if we think first about the real nature of human beings and their communication, both with each other and the world in general. This is something we seldom feel inclined to do because the implications are, for most of us, um, rather unappealing. For everyday purposes, we are happy to glance in the mirror, and even if we do not consciously frame the words, we think, that's me. This is, of course, sheer nonsense. Our hair, eyes, teeth, and even our arms and legs are not me at all. People might have their arms and legs amputated, their eyes and teeth removed, kidney taken out, ears destroyed, and much else beside excised from their bodies, but still remain the same person whom they were before. The real me, that is to say, the thinking, conscious being with an identity, is found in the cortex of my brain. A small bony vault of my skull contains a blob of jelly, hidden within which is the I who is currently attempting to communicate with the outside world by triggering muscles which make my fingers jab at little plastic squares on a keyboard or my tongue waggle like a semaphore signal. The slimy substance flopping around like a blancmange in the brain pan at the bottom of my skull is my brain, and it weighs about a kilogram and a half. Only the thin outer layer called the cortex, which makes up half of the brain by weight, is used for thought. The rest is just wiring. Imagine, if you will, an enormous slug, quite blind and deaf, as well as being completely paralyzed into the bargain. The unattractive grey creature that I'm describing occupies roughly the same volume as a pint of beer, and it is me. I, that is to say, the human personality, am confined to a dark and windowless cell, which is roughly the size of a small saucepan, and from which I may never escape even for a moment. Everything which makes up my personality and mind is to be found in this cramped space, completely cut off from the outside world, connected to it only by a few cables carrying electric impulses. Almost all the information which I am able to obtain about what is going on outside the dark space where I am held is supplied by just four of these cables, two for audio and a couple more for visual input. I have no other way of learning anything at all about the inhabitants of those other billions of little prisons which each contain a handful of organic matter holding the essence of a human mind. They in turn are also utterly blind and deaf, apart from similarly restricted inputs from the world. This is such a bleak and ghastly view of the self that we feel in our hearts that it cannot really be the case, but a few seconds' thought confirms that it is indeed so. The essential I is no more than a pint of organic matter through which travel weak electric currents. There is no more to me than that. If we accept that there is no evidence for telepathy or extrasensory perception, then there are only two possible ways that any of these minds can know anything about the others, which is, of course, what is meant by the word empathy. One method is introspection. We can look within and ask how we ourselves feel about the world around us, and then extrapolate from our own individual, personal, and altogether subjective feelings to assume that everybody else in the world is of similar mind to us. This method is utterly useless, of course, for we all have varying tastes and inclinations, delighting in different things. I may love solitude, but for many people it is anathema. Some adore silence, others prefer the sound of birdsong or rock music. Reading is a joy for some, a burdensome chore for others. Looking into my own heart and soul to try and work out the mental state of other people would be quite mad. None of us have the remotest idea how anybody other than ourselves experiences grief, toothache, orgasms, loneliness, love, hunger, or anything else at all. I may gain the keenest pleasure from eating an olive, for instance, while another person sitting a few feet away at the same table as me finds the texture and taste unbearably slimy and bitter. The only other method by which we may hope to know something of other minds is by means of spoken or written language, and this poses an enormous, one might more aptly say insuperable obstacle to understanding. Our fleeting and ephemeral thoughts have first to be translated into whatever language is spoken by the person with whom we wish to communicate. This in itself is no easy matter, selecting the correct sequence of words which might convey precisely our meaning. Even having done so, we have no assurance, none whatever, that the word we have chosen will represent to somebody else the same as it does to us. Just like the sensation of eating olives, the same word can evoke quite different, even contradictory responses in other people than those it arouses in us. The word solitude might evoke heaven or hell, depending entirely upon the person who hears it. Having arranged a group of words in a way which roughly approximates our original thoughts, we must then go through the laborious process of signalling them to another person. This is typically done by manipulating a complicated series of muscles in our mouths and then blowing air over a pattern of moist membranes in order to nudge the nearby gas molecules. This longitudinal compression wave must once generated be powerful enough to reach a tympanic membrane, where it will be converted to electric impulses which are decoded by the individual at whom they have been directed, who is, of course, crouched in a pitch dark environment. The words have then to be compared with a database and the syntax and grammar reconstructed, the meaning then being laboriously extracted. The chances that the decoded message will say anything useful about the actual mental state of the sender are slender to non-existent. There's one more point which needs to be considered when we are discussing communication between humans and understanding what other people are thinking and how they are feeling. This is the indisputable fact that everybody lies. Sometimes this is done by acts of omission, leaving out information when we are speaking to other people or typing messages. At least as often it is a deliberate and witting decision to mislead or deceive the person with whom we are in contact. This means that even when the communication sent by one of those blind prisoners in his little cell is by some miracle interpreted with perfect clarity by the person at whom it is directed, there is no reason at all to suppose that the contents of the message are accurate and truthful. We can never check directly what another person is thinking, and so are obliged to take everything on trust. It is by no means impossible that some viewers will at this point rebel and protest that this is altogether too cynical a view of the matter. Of course, politicians lie, and we may not be entirely sure what other people are thinking. We know our family and friends fairly well, and probably have a good idea of what might be going through their mind at any given moment. See how absurdly optimistic this attitude is. It is necessary only to consider the situation when a married couple are making love. This is about as close to unrestrained intimacy as we can hope to get. Man and woman, or two men or two women with their bodies pressed against each other, even within each other. Is it really being hinted at that even in such startlingly close moments, lies are being told and deception practiced? Can it really be true that neither party has any idea what is going through the mind of the other? Men who suffer from premature ejaculation, a not uncommon condition, are often advised that when they are on the brink of orgasm, they should slow their sexual excitement by thinking of something entirely different, perhaps timetables, the Prime Ministers of Britain, winners of the FA Cup, and so on. This strategy tends to dampen down and delay their ejaculation and prolong the sexual enjoyment for their partner, perhaps giving her a chance to climax as well. It is also not unusual for even the most affectionate couple to be engaged in a fantasy life during coitus, constructing some scenario which arouses them, or even imagining that they are in fact making love to some previous partner. It is therefore perfectly plausible that a couple of people who have lived together for 30 or 40 years might be making passionate love, one thinking of previous winners of the FA Cup, and the other about a former sexual partner whom she has not seen for years. Neither can have the remotest idea of what the other is thinking or feeling. Despite the closest physical proximity, they remain strangers, each closed off within his or her own little cell. This then is the true nature of human existence and contact with fellow beings, which many readers will find extremely distasteful. Well, I should say viewers, really, and so forget almost as soon as they have read it. Some 2,000 years ago, a Jewish sage summed up the sensible attitude towards empathy and caring about others in a pithy aphorism. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? First, one must take care of one's self, and only when this has been done can you turn to others and see what you might be able to do for them. Unfortunately, much religious teaching and also the modern view of what is correct and ethical behaviour tends to be opposed to this point of view. At the back of many people's minds is the idea that we really should strive to be saints who put the welfare of others before our own. Isn't this the ideal at which we should all aim? Self-denial of this kind is anything but praiseworthy. Ignoring your own interest in pursuit of another person's well-being is pathological behaviour, and it's symptomatic of a masochistic neurosis rather than any healthy and normal human lifestyle. When most of us spend so much time hiding our deepest feelings from ourselves, never mind about trying to mask them from other people, it would make more sense for average men or women to get their own affairs in order before even contemplating from trying to help others or understand them. Rather than fooling around and trying to use empathy to understand others, we should instead make a concentrated effort to understand ourselves. I suggested that the very people who are most widely credited with or claim to have a good supply of empathy are likely at best to be deluded fools and at worst dishonest hypocrites. This might sound a little harsh, but a few moments' thought will show it must inevitably be so. If a loving couple who may have been sharing a bed for decades cannot know what is going through each other's mind at the moment of greatest intimacy, what are the chances that we might accurately gauge what is going on in the mind of our friends, let alone strangers or casual acquaintances? The thing is a nonsense, as any honest person will readily concede. It inevitably follows that anybody claiming such an ability, which is tantamount to telepathy, is either grossly mistaken or deliberately lying. Those who represent themselves as being possessed of an uncommon level of empathy are more untrustworthy and deceitful than the people who frankly admit that they have not a clue what anybody else is thinking, and moreover do not waste time trying to guess what other people are up to. Modern society, though, exalts those who boast of their empathetic natures, while viewing with contempt any individual who dismisses the whole idea and shows that he or she has no interest in empathy. So it is that the liars and rogues rise in our estimation, and the honest folks sink. Not perhaps how we generally feel matters should be. Anyway, that's I felt it might be worthwhile saying a few words on the subject of empathy, since this is, as I say, World Empathy Day.